The Equalizer relates the story of Robert McCall, a Boston resident. Every day, Robert works at the Home Mart hardware shop. Robert is an ordinary man who has an ordinary life. At work, Robert befriends an obese coworker named Ralphie, who is on a diet in preparation for the security officer selection exam. Robert then encouraged Ralphie to avoid high-carbohydrate diets and instead consume more fiber-rich foods. Robert is a very neat guy, careful and diligent in all of his actions, and he has a habit of using the seconds counter on his watch to calculate how long the activities take. Robert always read a book in the evening at a restaurant to which he subscribed, bringing his own tea bags and utensils. Robert's habit of constantly tidying up is visible when he sets his napkins and silverware on the table, which he always ensures is clean and the cutlery is in its right place. The ambience in the diner was less packed that night. There were just a few customers, including a lovely girl named Alina, who greeted Robert and inquired about the story in the book he was reading. Not long later, Alina said her goodbyes to Robert and left, then phoned a taxi. The next day, Robert resumed his usual activities. He went to work at Home Mart, chatted with Ralphie and his coworkers, and then returned home to clean up. Robert also ate dinner, and that evening he returned to his normal cafe with a book to read. Shortly after Robert arrived, Alina was observed entering the diner wearing scant clothes and excessive makeup. Alina was going to order a drink when her phone rang. It was a call from her supervisor. Alina is revealed to be a teenage prostitute known as Teri, who works for the Russian mob, Slavy. That night, Alina was expected to serve a customer who had picked her up in front of the diner. Over the phone, Alina tries to avoid her job and persuades Slavy not to service the customer. However, the man frequently abuses Alina. Slavy, however, ignored this and ordered Alina to complete her task right now. Slavy then reminds Alina of what she owes him and threatens to murder her. Hearing the threat, Alina had no choice but to follow Slavy's commands. Alina then exited the diner and approached the man who had picked her up outside, followed by Robert's inquisitive glance at the female. The next day, Robert accompanied Ralphie, who was working out to lose weight in preparation for the security officer selection exam. Even though Ralphie appeared to be struggling and nearly giving up due to the extensive training, Robert continued to encourage and assist him with all of his heart so that Ralphie might accomplish his dream of becoming a security guard. Long story short, Robert resumed his usual habits, which included going to his favorite restaurant and reading books. That night, Alina arrived first. Alina then approached Robert at the corner of her favorite table and begged for permission to sit there. Robert invited Alina to sit and accompany him, and he spotted bruises on her beautiful face. After conversing for a time, Robert discovers that Alina is obliged to work for Slavy due to debt, despite the fact that the girl aspires to be a famous singer. Alina then gave Robert a CD with a recording of a song she sang. Robert was delighted to receive the present and told the girl that he would listen. After speaking pleasantly during the diner, Robert decided to walk Alina home. They had an interesting talk along the way until a car pulled up in front of them. Slavy stepped out of the car and went straight to Alina. Slavy then slapped and strangled Alina because she had disappointed her customer last night and demanded recompense from him. When Robert noticed this, he was about to help Alina, but Slavy threatened him not to meddle. Slavy then handed Robert a business card and requested him to call him if he needed a comfort woman. After that, Slavy carried Alina away. In the following nights, Robert no longer saw Alina at his usual diner. One night, one of the cafe staff informed Robert that Alina had been beaten by someone and was being treated at the hospital. When Robert heard this, he went to the hospital and discovered Alina laying helpless, her face covered in bruises. Mandy, Alina's coworker, then tells Robert that Alina has been punished by Slavy for frequently rebelling and disregarding his commands. When Robert saw Alina's bad state and suffering as a result of the harsh treatment she suffered from customers and her pimp, he felt sorry for her and decided to assist her in getting out of the troubles and complicated situations she faced. The scene then turns to Slavy entering his luxury restaurant. Slavy then went to his office, where several of his guys had been waiting for the man to arrive so that they could deposit money from those who owed him. Not long after, Robert entered Slavy's office and offered the man money to liberate Alina, allowing her to stop working for him. However, Slavy instantly refused the offer, stating that he could make more money if Alina returned to work for him. Robert returned the money and moved towards the door after Slavy refused his offer. After standing in front of the door, Robert did not immediately leave Slavy's office. Instead, the man bolted the door and turned to confront Slavy and his henchmen. Robert briefly observed the people and stuff in the room, estimating that it would take him only 16 seconds to kill everyone. Slavy and all of his henchmen were defeated by Robert, who massacred them with a cold, expressionless visage. Slavy implored Robert to save his life, but it was too late. Slavy had flatly denied Robert's offer at the start of their meeting. After that, Robert returned home and resumed his usual activities in the following days. Robert had seen a television broadcast on the murder of Slavy and his henchmen, in which the police determined that the murder was the result of a frequent gang fight. The picture then turns to a man named Teri Renson, who has recently arrived in the United States and has raced to the scene of Slavy's death. Teri is an errand boy for Slavy's boss, Vladimir Pushkin, who has been assigned to investigate Slavy's murder and uncover the perpetrator. Teri, a former member of the Russian secret police with special force training, could readily deduce that the person who murdered Slavy and his henchmen was not a random individual, but rather someone trained to fight and kill. Meanwhile, Ralphie's resignation comes as a shock to Robert. When Robert visited Ralphie at his home, he appeared to be assisting his mother in cleaning up his mother's shop, which had been maliciously set on fire by corrupt police officers because her mother refused to pay the security money. As a result, Ralphie decided to leave his job at Home Mart and focus on assisting his mother with the store. In the evening, Robert decides to assist Ralphie, and he surreptitiously tracks unscrupulous cops who collect security deposits from small business owners in Ralphie's neighborhood. Robert then videotaped the corrupt policemen's conduct and confronted them, threatening to disseminate the footage if they did not stop. The crooked officers fought back, but Robert was stronger. After being beaten to a pulp by Robert, the corrupt police officers returned what they had stolen from the people and stopped carrying out the deed. Because Ralphie's mother had secured venture funding to refurbish her shop and restart her business, Ralphie returned to work at Home Mart, continued his hard training, and achieved his goal of becoming a security officer. Teddy appears to be interrogating thugs who frequently do business with Slavy, and Teddy is willing to use violence to obtain the information he needs to discover the mastermind behind Slavy's death. With no results, Teddy begins an investigation with Slavy's prostitutes, where he eventually learns about Alina, who has recently had troubles with Slavy. Teddy then approaches Mandy and asks her to expose all of the details about Alina and her rebellion to Slavy. Mandy then told Teddy about the black man who had come to see Alina at the hospital. After that, Teddy murders Mandy. Teddy investigated the CCTV cameras at the hospital and the area of Slavy's murder as soon as he received information from Mandy, and Robert's figure was visible, albeit dimly. One day, Robert is presented with another circumstance in which he must move swiftly to incapacitate a man attempting to rob a Home Mart cashier, who happens to be Robert's coworker. Because there were so many guests with children at the time, Robert decided to grant the robber's wishes, including the cashier's gold ring. Robert let the man off the hook, but he vividly remembered the license plate of the automobile he was driving. Long story short, the female cashier was astonished to discover that her ring, which had been robbed the day before, was now in the cash register, and Robert was seen wiping the massive hammer he used to knock out the robber and reclaim the ring. That night, Teddy unexpectedly visits Robert's house and claims to be a police officer investigating the Slavy murder case. Teddy then inquires about the whereabouts of Robert, who was at a fine restaurant on the night of Slavy's murder. To avoid Teddy's suspicions, Robert, who had been educated to handle the situation, calmly answered all of his questions. Teddy said goodbye to Robert and soon left. However, Teddy and Robert were both aware that they had lied. Robert can already tell Teddy is not a police officer, and Teddy thinks that Robert is the mastermind behind Slavy's murder. Knowing that the Russian mob is now chasing him, Robert instantly devises a strategy to escape his flat. Long story short, Teddy instructs one of his men to assault Robert at the diner, where Robert can easily defeat Teddy's guys. Robert then leaves the diner and finds Teddy in his car, where he takes a picture of him with his cell phone camera. Teddy and his men tracked Robert to his flat, but he was not there. Teddy searches the flat for clues as to who Robert is, but only finds narcotics and broken sports tickets. On the other hand, Robert appears to be someplace else, viewing Teddy and his goons through a hidden camera in his flat. Knowing he is dealing with one of the world's largest Russian criminal groups, Robert chooses to see his old friend and Defense Intelligence Agency colleague, Susan Palmer, who uses her resources to provide Robert with information about Vladimir Pushkin and his operations. Susan also informs Robert of Teddy Renson's real name, Nikolaichenko. Susan informed her husband that Robert did not ask for help, but rather permission. To destroy Pushkin's operations in the United States, Robert first goes to Pushkin's cash vault, where he can easily incapacitate all of Pushkin's men, lock them all in the refrigerator, and then call the cops while leaving evidence in the form of a memory stick loaded with information about Pushkin's illegal activities. Teri is seen eating dinner at a posh restaurant later in the evening. A figure emerges in front of him, revealing himself to be a skilled assassin hired by Teri to assassinate Robert. However, just after the man had left Teri's table, Robert entered the restaurant and approached him. Robert then sat down and handed Teri Hitman's damaged and bloodied glasses. Robert then discloses that he is already aware of Teri's past and tells him to stop chasing him, promising to bring down Pushkin's criminal operation. Later, Robert destroys Pushkin's oil tankers, finally destroying his entire enterprise in the United States. Teri instantly devised a scheme to paralyze Robert. Teri and his thugs go to Home Mart and kidnap some of Robert's co-workers. Teri then called Robert and threatened to kill his co-workers if he did not come to the Home Mart store shortly. Apparently, Robert had anticipated this as he sneaked into the control room and turned on the speakers to distract Teri and his goons. After taking down some of Teri's guys, Robert frees Ralphie and asks him to assist their co-workers in escaping through the back door. After ensuring that Ralphie and his co-workers were secure, Robert turned off the main lighting in the Home Mart store, leaving only faint spotlights. Robert swiftly kills Teri's guys one by one with the equipment available, before confronting Teri and killing him with a nail gun. 3 days later, Robert travels to Moscow and murders all of Pushkin's guards at his mansion. Robert deceives Pushkin into electrocuting himself to death. With Vladimir Pushkin's death, it is certain that all of his unlawful activities have ended. Robert returned to the United States, and Alina, who had recovered from her injuries, approached him outside the grocery store. Alina says that she has begun a new and better life since being released from Slavy. Alina also thanked Robert for giving her another chance, kissing him lightly on the cheek. Following what occurred to Alina and her co-workers, Robert felt encouraged to continue using his expertise to aid those in need. As usual, Robert goes to his normal diner in the evening, but this time the man delivers not just a book, but also a laptop, which Robert uses to post an internet advertisement identifying himself as the Equalizer. The lesson of the story is that, regardless of our past or upbringing, we have the ability to choose the type of person we want to be in the future. Using his expertise, Robert decides to assist those around him and solve the problems they encounter. This is done completely out of compassion and care for others.